On this edition of Prime Sports College Hoops, brought to you by Covers.com, your one-stop shop for current and accurate sports gaming info, we'll preview this week's college basketball conference tournament action, including the ACC, SEC, Big 12, Big East, and Pac-12, with the latest conference championship odds, national championship odds, predictions, and more, as Prime Sports College Hoops on the Prime Sports Radio Network starts now. All right, Monday, March 5th, 2018. I'm Greg DePalma. You're listening to Prime Sports College Hoops. March Madness underway. 4 bids awarded yesterday with the championship games, including Michigan in the Big Ten. So we'll talk a little bit about that and whether or not any of those other 3 teams, Lipscomb, Loyola, or Radford, are teams that you should keep an eye on when your brackets are ready to go at this time next week. Speaking of at this time, I'd like to welcome one of our new marketing partners to the network at Covers.com. Covers has the best handicapping data on the web for all major sports, including college basketball. And I'm very excited to have this opportunity to work with Covers and their top handicappers, including my special guest on today's show, college hoops analyst Steve Merrill. Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, great to be here.
All right, Steve. So actually, before we get started, I wanted to make sure our listeners visit Covers Experts. That's experts.covers.com for the very best in sports betting advice. And for a limited time only, you can take off 50%, or they will take off 50% off any purchase by using promo code PRIME50. That's PRIME50. So use that promo code. And again, for a limited time only, you'll get 50% off any purchase. Again, Covers Experts. Steve, anytime I introduce a new analyst to the program, to the network, I would like to find out a little bit about you. How long you've been doing this handicapping in the industry?
I've been a full-time professional handicapper since 1996. So I say 21 years, but I guess now it's technically 22 years. I started with football in 1996, so we'll say 21 and a half years now. Just so I don't feel too old. But,
right.
Yeah, things have obviously changed a little bit. You know, I came in 96 right when the Internet was coming in.
Perfect timing.
And I've seen quite a run there. And, you know, websites like Covers.com weren't even around back when I started. Now there's just a tremendous wealth of information out there for people.
Yeah, I mean, I have used Covers for many years myself. I mean, I forget there was another website I had used before Covers, and then that website left. I don't know why. It just went off or merged somewhere. And then I was lucky enough to find Covers. And one of the reasons why I love using Covers is because it's so, I mean, really serious. I can't. It has everything that you want as far as breaking down the games, no matter what it is. If we're going to talk college basketball, you get to go in there and you click a couple of different pages and you get results, you get injury updates, you get anything that you want that can get you, and so much other information that I know I don't even use. I mean, probably 90% of the information it covers I don't even use. That's how much information you have.
No question about it. You know, I'm a full-time professional handicapper. Yes, I have some proprietary databases and programs that I use in the office, but I still use Covers on a daily basis just because, like you said, everything is so well organized and it's just professionally done. You know, the matchups, the injury, the player stats. It really is a wealth of information. What's great about it is it's completely free. You don't even have to pay a subscription to see that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not promoting it because I'm on the site. I'm promoting it because I use it as well.
Right.
I think it's a great handicapping tool, and I like to help my clients, learn while they earn.
All right, now let's get into this college basketball. I love it. This is these next 2 weeks are the 2 best weeks of the season if you're a college basketball fan. And the Big Ten tournament. And you know what? I know that, I don't know. I know there was a whole lot of panic for the Big Ten fans about having the tournament a week early, but I think it's great. I mean, there's so many other big tournaments, like I just said at the Open, ACC, Big 12, Big East, Pac-12, SEC, all this week. I mean, why flood yourself and get kind of mixed in with those other big ones when you're kind of standalone by yourself? I think that kind of works out really well for the Big Ten, but Michigan has dropped. I took them on my futures last week, and thank goodness I did at 40-1. And they've now dropped down to, I know in some places, 15-1, which is about right considering how well they played recently. It's still a pretty decent number if you think they can win the national championship. And the way they played, why can't they?
No question. I mean, momentum is so important when you get into the playoffs, into the postseason in any sport. but I think it's even more so in college basketball because these teams are so young. You look at a team like Kentucky every year; they're basically all freshmen. So a team like Kentucky in November and December is not the same team that's in the tournament. It's almost a second season for them. And right now, I run several different sets of power ratings. I use some based on strength of schedule, some based on conference games only. I also have some based on recent play only. And in the recent play only, I've got Michigan as a top 2 to 3 team right now in the past month. So they are peaking at the right time, and that's exactly why you see them now in the top 10 in the overall odds to win the tournament.
Yeah, they are well coached, and they're always going to be a team that's going to get better as the year goes on. Bayline's system is very difficult to understand, but once they get a hang of it, like they did last year when they peaked at the end of the season, that's exactly what's happening to them now. And look, when you have guys like Simpson and Teskey that are 2 of your top players over the past few days in the tournament, and these guys are like 4 through 6, if you were going to say where would they roughly rank really on the team as far as importance, you would say probably 4 to 6. And if those two guys are playing as well as they did in the Big Ten tournament, and they're able to do that in the Big Dance in a couple of weeks. They're going to be awfully tough to beat. And part of that is, as you mentioned, young teams, they've got a couple of big seniors, including Muhammad Abdur Rahman and Duncan Robinson, who's been shooting lights out. And you shoot lights out from 3. That is a big asset. And, of course, Mo Wagner, being a junior, he's played a lot of games. So they've got a lot of veteran guys on the team. And that's what's going to make them awfully tough. The only thing is, of course, we don't know who they're going to play, how they're going to match up. And that's one of the I guess that's one of the problems that you might have to encounter on whether or not you want to go ahead and take futures now on certain teams before you see the bracket.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about the future prices in general for any sport, and this is kind of a futures 101, disclaimer that I give people, is that in general, futures usually are not a good bet for a couple reasons. First of all, they aren't letting you take the no on these teams. You're only betting the yes, will they win it? So the odds are skewed. You're not getting as good of a payoff if it was a balanced, two-way market, for example. The other thing about futures, now it doesn't apply as much now because we're only a couple weeks away from the tournament, but say like college football futures for next year, do you really want to tie your bankroll up for the next 11 months to get paid, because you put that money up front? So with that said, the only time I think futures are worth a look is when you're getting a real good long shot for a couple reasons. First of all, the risk reward is better. If you're tying your money up for, several months, you're getting a better payoff. Plus, you don't have to risk as much. At a 40 to 1 or 50 to 1, you don't have to bet as much to win big.
Yep.
I think with these teams like Michigan, these other top 10 teams right now, you're often better off doing a money line parlay come tournament time, just letting it ride. You start with, a single game wager and you let it ride for all 6 games. And if you do that mathematically, almost every year you get a better return than if you had played the future price even when the tournament begins.
Yeah, that's why it was a good idea to get him at 40 to 1. Now you're just better off just waiting until the tournament begins. Look at the bracket, decide what you want to do. Or just, like you said, your strategy. Plus, you could also just wait and see after what happens after a couple of rounds, because it's always I also think you get kind of a feel for a tournament and the teams in general and how they play the first round or two. And I know you're going to have to invest a lot more money, but still, this is a tournament that really, I know we've kind of talked about some wide open tournaments in seasons past, but I haven't seen a tournament like this ever. There were just no dominant teams. I mean, I'm sorry, but when Virginia is supposed to be the top team in college basketball, you've got a wide open tournament.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting about Virginia and what I like about them, I don't like the fact they're kind of number 1 now, because you always kind of want to find a team that's maybe not the top 2 or 3, because it just doesn't seem to play out that way. And I agree with you. I do kind of have a mixed feelings about Virginia. But what I love about Virginia, though, is their style of play. And that goes back to what we're talking about Michigan. Slow down, half-court, good defensive team. Those are the type of teams I like to use in the tournament. And one other team right now in my top 10 as well that plays that way is Cincinnati. And I feel like they're maybe flying under the radar more than anybody. I think the ACC is definitely down a notch this year. And then, of course, America East with Cincinnati obviously is very questionable. I do think the Big Ten right now maybe looks like the conference to beat along with the Big 12. In fact, I've got Michigan State and Purdue ahead of Michigan still in my power ratings, even though we're talking about how good Michigan has been recently.
Well, Cincinnati, I know their odds are still pretty good for futures. I grabbed them a couple of times in recent weeks, right around 25, 30 to 1. but I did think it was very important for them to win that game against Wichita State because that was a game they really needed to win. You didn't want to lose twice to Wichita State before you go to the tournament because that would, confidence-wise, not be a very good deal there, but they were able to get the win, and that should go a long way. The only thing with Cincinnati that bothered me real early in the season and why I waited a long time to actually take them was because of the fact that they've seemed to disappoint. I mean, I've kind of liked some of their teams in the recent 5 or 6 year stretch, but this team just doesn't go very far come tournament time. So I expect a lot from them. I know they expect a lot for them, but you're right. I mean, they're still going to be considered a sleeper, even though maybe knocking off Wichita State, that might open some eyes.
Yeah, I like them at 25-1. I mean, right now there's 10 to 12 teams ahead of them in the future odds, yet in my power ratings, I have them as a number 1 seed right now.
Oh,
so
okay.
That's probably more value with Cincinnati for that reason. But I'm with you, Greg. I mean, if you go by a gut feeling,
yep,
you're like, Cincinnati's not going to win it. And I feel the same way about Virginia. You just say, they're not going to win it. But if you look at the numbers, there probably is some value right now with Cincinnati at 25-1 because they're better than those odds are saying.
All right. Now, we were talking about Virginia. Let's talk about the ACC tournament. And speaking of Virginia, and they're kind of up there as the co-favorites with Duke. And I don't know exactly. Look, this should be a pretty good tournament because I've seen in recent years, we don't necessarily always see the favorite winning, especially some of these big tournaments. And this year, because of all the parity, I mean, you got a lot of teams that have a shot. And matter of fact, my favorite sleeper is going to be Virginia Tech because of the way that they've already been able to knock off a bunch of top 5 teams. And Buzz Williams has done a really good job there. I like the makeup of their team. They've got some really good upperclassmen. They're pretty deep. So I think Virginia Tech, who right now is right around 30-1, something like that, to win the. I know what are the sports books I saw them at 30-1 to win the ACC championship, which is a pretty high number. And I'm also very intrigued by Notre Dame because Colson's back.
Yeah, one thing about these conference tournaments, you're exactly right. The best teams don't win them. And in fact, I think sometimes it does you a disservice to win these tournaments. We talked about the Big Ten had that extra week off this year. I think that's going to serve them well. One of the worst things is to make the finals on a Sunday, or even Saturday night or a Sunday afternoon, even if you win or lose, because then you're on a short week heading into the NCAA tournament. It usually doesn't help your seeding that much.
Sure.
So wouldn't be surprised to see a team like Virginia Tech make a run. And keep in mind, they beat Virginia on the road this season.
That's right.
So they had probably the most impressive win in ACC play out of any team this year.
Yeah, and again, I don't know. I considering Notre Dame did go to Virginia and that game went down to the wire, even though they lost. And look, we're not even sure Notre Dame's going to get into the NCAA tournament, and that's another reason why I think they wouldn't be a bad idea because they're really out of all the other teams. I don't know, maybe Louisville still might be on the fence. So teams like Louisville and Notre Dame and maybe Syracuse, those are teams that are going to be really feeling the pressure. Maybe Florida State. I don't know. I mean, if they were to go one and done and some of these other bubble teams were to play well, they might be in trouble too. So do you have a sleeper in the ACC that you particularly like?
Yeah, Virginia Tech, I think, could
That's
surprise
the one?
a little bit. I don't know if
Okay.
they can win the whole thing. But one thing about Notre Dame is, they take a lot of threes. And it's like any of these teams, Michigan, anybody else that takes threes. When you get hot, you can beat anybody on these one-and-done situations like the conference tournaments and the NCAA tournaments. But also the other flip of the coin is if they're not hitting those shots, they can lose to anybody. But I think
True.
A team like Notre Dame, the fact that they live and die by the three more than others could go on a run. I think Louisville plays good half-court defense. They're a well-coached team. They've underachieved this season, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see Louisville play a little bit better because I think they have a good makeup with Pitino come tournament time.
All right, let's talk now about the Big 12. And in the Big 12, you've got Kansas right now. I tell you what, the last few years, I don't really like Kansas, or haven't liked Kansas, maybe because of the fact that they've had some of these superstars, young players, and I didn't like the chemistry. But this team doesn't have those superstars yet. I do believe that they play better as a team. They have a player in Graham who can knock down big shots. I don't care about the Oklahoma State game the other day. They didn't care about the game. They took their foot off the gas. They had already clinched the regular season title, so that means nothing to me. But I think they were roughly somewhere, they were somewhere around one of the favorites to win the national championship, right around the 10-1, a little less than that. Those odds, those are a little low for me. I get that. And picking a favorite in this tournament is probably not the way to go because you're not going to get much bang for your buck. But as far as a sleeper, the team that did beat them and beat them twice, the first team to knock off Kansas twice, like in 15 years in one season, Oklahoma State. They're a pretty big number to win the Big 12 tournament, and it wouldn't be a surprise to see Oklahoma State maybe even be able to make it semifinals to the finals, and if they can do that, then maybe they have a shot.
What's interesting about the Big 12 is, obviously Kansas clinched over a week ago, but the best scoring margin this season in the conference has actually been West Virginia. They've won by a better margin than any other team in this conference. And once again, a veteran coach, a good defensive team, a pressure team. West Virginia has the makeup of a team that could do very well in postseason play. And technically, if you look at scoring margin, they're actually the best team in the conference this year. So I feel like they're going a little bit under the radar right now.
All right. Then in the Big East, another sleeper right now that I have is Creighton. And like what Creighton did in that upset over Villanova, they're well coached with Greg McDermott. They've got a couple of really good players, including Marcus Foster. I believe they're 8-1 to win the conference championship, or right around that number at some of the books. So Creighton is my top sleeper. There are a lot of pretty good sleepers, though. The top to bottom, this is going to be a really entertaining tournament.
Yeah, it's obviously very top-heavy this year. Villanova and Xavier are definitely a class above everybody else in this conference. They both stand 27-4. Creighton and Seton Hall both have 10 losses. They're the next closest teams. What concerns me about Creighton, though, they're 20-10 overall, but they're just 4-9 this year against teams in the top 50 of my power ratings. You compare Villanova and Xavier, they're 10-2, 10-3 each against those type of teams. In fact, no other team in the conference other than Xavier and Villanova have a winning record against top 50 opponents this year. So I think this is probably the one conference tournament I'd be surprised if either Villanova or Xavier, one of the favorites, doesn't win it.
Well, if it's Villanova and Xavier in the final, then we know which team's going to win, because Xavier just can't play against Villanova for whatever reasons. So Xavier, I'm sure, would like nothing better than to see Villanova get upset before that. And the thing with Villanova, as much as I do like him still as potentially, definitely a Final Four team and maybe win another national championship, is that they have been knocked off lately. This hasn't been a great stretch run for them down the end of the wire. But now it's time. I think this tournament's going to be interesting for me, because I think because they haven't played particularly their best basketball over the last month. I'm interested to see exactly how well they play in the Big East tournament. So, but yeah, we might get another Villanova Xavier final. If we do, Xavier better be keeping their fingers crossed they don't get blown out there. The Pac-12, this tournament should be crazy because of what's going on with Arizona. And we still have no idea what's going to go on with Miller. And, of course, the entire FBI investigation. That could be a big distraction. So this could be a wide-open conference race. We might only get a couple of teams in the tournament. So because of that, I expect this to be wide open.
Yeah, you have to be very careful with Arizona right now. In fact, last Saturday, a week and a half ago, I had a best bet on Oregon against Arizona. The line opened around -1.5. I released it at -4.5, -5. And then that afternoon went up to -7 and then came back down to 4.5. And Oregon wins by 5 in overtime. So that's just how crazy things have been involving Arizona with both the team itself and even the point spreads on their games. Both the odds makers and the betting public are having trouble to know what to do with them right now. So I would be very cautious with them. I think this is definitely a tournament in which we could see an underdog, an upset from one of the lower seeds. And really for the reason you said, Greg, because this has not been a strong conference this season. It's definitely down a notch. Arizona was the team to beat, but their focus is now a big question. In fact, if you look outside of Arizona, I barely have any other teams in my top 40 power rankings in this entire conference right now. That's how much they're down this season.
Yeah, I wonder what's going to happen with USC and UCLA. UCLA just knocked off USC. That was a big win for the Bruins. Well, both of those teams are on the bubble. My top sleeper in the Pac-12 is going to be Stanford. I like the coaching hire of Jared Haas. This is only his second year. They've got a big-time player in Reed Travis. Stanford's playing their best basketball of the year. You can get a nice number on them to win the conference championship, somewhere in the teens. So I like Stanford as my top sleeper. Do you have a specific sleeper you like?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it'd be a real sleeper. I think Oregon State, I'm not calling them to win at 15-15, but I think they can make some noise. This is a team that plays at a pretty slow pace. And as the theme of the show is, I like these teams that can slow the game down, play half court, because when you're playing multiple days in a row and you can dictate the tempo and force, some teams that want to play faster, like a lot of these Pac-12 teams do, I think Oregon State, the Beavers, could actually cause some matchup problems. And they're actually a fairly efficient offensive team, even though they like to play slow.
Yeah, I actually expected more from Oregon State this year. I mean, what happened in the last year was incredible. They get to the tournament. I know they lost a superstar player, but Trust Tinkle came back. And after being injured last year, he only played a handful of games, and that's the reason they only won 5 games. But I still expected a little bit more from them. But I agree. I think they're also a very intriguing sleeper team for a couple of rounds. Let's go to the SEC, and a team that I noticed is roughly around 8 or 10 to 1 to win the championship is a team that I really like their odds, and that's Texas A&M. They've gone through a lot of adversity this year. Before the adversity, the injuries, suspensions, they were playing great basketball. But I know they've struggled a little bit lately, or they actually went through a rough period in the middle of the season. They have played a little bit better. They've also been able to kind of get a little bit more continuity going. I know they still have some issues as far as the roster is concerned, but they're a talented team. They're on the bubble, and I look at this conference, and the SEC does not. There's no question it is an improved conference. We get that, but still, when Auburn and a very young Kentucky team, and Auburn's very young, when they are like 2 of the top teams in the conference, they're gettable, and I think Texas A&M is a pretty good sleeper play. Who do you like? There's a bunch of teams to like in this conference, isn't there?
Yeah, we talked about it earlier at the top of the show. You never know what to make of Kentucky because they're always young.
Yeah.
This is a team that's definitely underperformed this year with 10 losses, but I still think they have some talent. Florida's right ahead of them in my power rankings. They, of course, just played at Florida this past Saturday in the regular season finale. Tennessee could make some noise.
Yes.
I think they've been flying under the radar most of the season.
Yes.
Auburn also dangerous. All those teams are right up there with Texas A&M in my ratings.
Yeah, I actually, out of all the teams in the SEC, if I had to just pick one when the NCAA tournament comes to go the farthest, I might just pick Tennessee. A lot's going to depend, obviously, on the bracket. But, yeah, very well coached. This is Barnes is starting to build something really nice there. By the way, Gonzaga St. Mary's, we might see them. We're probably going to see them in the final for the WCC. Semifinals are tonight. Who do you like? Who do you give the edge to if they wind up playing in the championship game?
What's interesting about St. Mary's is they play at one of the slowest paces in the nation. We talked about Virginia, Cincinnati, Michigan. St. Mary's is right
Nice
up there with tempo. And, that's the thing is Gonzaga likes to play faster. So you would think on the surface, St. Mary's could get them. It would not surprise me. What's tough about Gonzaga come tournament time is they're always really in my top 4 power rankings. And then when I start to factor in the strength of schedule dynamic, it makes things a lot trickier because obviously Gonzaga gets hit pretty hard with the weaker schedule, and you just never know how good they really are. I think St. Mary's is actually a bad matchup for them, but both of those teams really have not been tested this year. And I still think come tournament time, we've seen teams make a run. We saw Butler do it a few years back, but keep in mind they were playing a slow style. I really think St. Mary's come tournament time with that style could actually be more of a sleeper than Gonzaga just because they can slow teams down even when they're at maybe a slight athletic disadvantage. Yeah,
I actually just took St. Mary's last week in my last futures report at 100 to 1 to win the national championship. It's just so wide open this year in the NCAA tournament that I think a team like St. Mary's may finally be able to make a run deep, especially after we saw Gonzaga nearly win the national championship last year. I think maybe St. Mary's might be able to make a deep run, and on 100 to 1, it's worth a couple of bucks out of my bank account. One more thing. I opened up talking about the bids, and of course Michigan's in, and there were 3 others yesterday. One of the teams that is very intriguing is Lipscomb. Because they're coming from the Atlantic Sun. We've seen Florida Gulf Coast be very competitive. Of course, they made the run a few years ago under Einfeld, but they've still remained competitive come tournament time when they've been able to get there. But now Lipscomb beats them on their home floor. And you take a look at the offensive firepower from this team. Garrison Matthews was just absolutely incredible. If he shoots the ball like that come tournament time, Lipscomb could be a very dangerous first opponent in the NCAA tournament. They're clearly, in my mind, the most dangerous out of the other 3 teams we saw yesterday. I don't believe in Loyola Chicago. That Missouri Valley has just gone down the tubes with Wichita out of there. But you tell me. Anything with Lipscomb?
Yeah, what I don't like about Lipscomb is they play extremely fast. In
Sure.
fact, they might be the first or second fastest-paced team in the entire tournament this year, depending on who else makes it. And I just don't feel like the inferior teams that play fast can compete. I think the only way we're ever going to see like a 16-1 upset would be like what Princeton almost did to Georgetown several decades ago when they really slowed it down. Because when you have a team that likes to run like Lipscomb, you know the team they play is probably going to be more athletic, and
Sure.
it just feeds right into what they want to do.
Agreed. I mean, and that is what you have to keep an eye on in some of these other small conferences is when they have explosive firepower, you got to look at the other side. Well, can they play any sort of defense? And usually they don't. And if they don't play defense, you hit it right on the mark. Usually it's because now you're going to step up a competition. And it's really going to be dangerous for them. But, hey, you know what? It's a one-game situation. If they can shoot lights out, then that's what the whole ball game can be about. But, you know, it would be nice. Maybe it'd be a good idea. And I know the committee says they don't look at it, but I don't believe them as far as matchups. So who knows? Maybe they'll match up with one of these really slow-paced teams. And we'll see something like that when the bracket comes out. Speaking of the bracket, we look forward to talking to you next week. What do you do when because we're going to have our bracket show next Monday, a week from today, and so we'll get you on for that. As far as the bracket breakdown and everything like that, well, what do you normally do, and related to just you personally, as well as the general public who wants to find out, what you're interested in? How do you handle that whole thing? Do you get any sleep after the bracket comes out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely working hard, obviously, Sunday night and all of Monday on the bracket. I mean, for me, I'm looking more at point spreads. But, hey, look, the NCAA tournament is fantastic. It's still probably my favorite sporting event since I was a kid, and it's just a great dynamic, and the bracket is what makes it so exciting. So I do a bracket. Some years we hit it spot on. Some years we're way off. Some years, after a couple rounds, the team I had in my bracket, I might end up playing against because I see something, in those first two rounds.
Sure.
But look, the bracket's fun. And what's great about the bracket is it's like a cheap future. You can play them for a couple dollars. You're risking very little to get a lot of hours of entertainment. So yes, the bracket is definitely something I handicap and look at. But the big money, of course, is isolating those point spread plays because the NCAA tournament, what amazes me, Greg, is how tight the numbers are. These are teams from different conferences.
Yep.
No common opponents normally, yet we will see several games on Thursday and Friday in that first round that land within a point of the point spread. There's so much data to look at this time of year. It's amazing how tight the numbers can still be.
Steve, have a great week. Thanks for checking in with us for the very first time. We look forward to previewing or having you come on for a segment on our preview show next week and giving us your take on a few little oddities or overall predictions or anything that you want to provide to the audience. And we'll also make sure to let everybody know to check you out at Covers in the expert section. Look for you there amongst the other handicappers, and make sure they check you out.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Steve. All right, that's Steve Merrill, who is joining us for the very first time here. And speaking of Covers experts, you can go to experts.covers.com for the best sports betting advice on the web. And don't forget, for a limited time only, take 50% off any purchase by using promo code PRIME50. That's PRIME50. And get that discount now. And this is the perfect time of season to do that, of course, with college basketball tournaments starting next week and all the conference tournaments starting, or a lot of them, not only underway, but there's some championship games tonight and, of course, all week long. Make sure to check our on-demand shows here on the network, following every live broadcast on YouTube or iTunes under Prime Sports Network. Follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. We'll see you tomorrow for our Valspar Championship edition of Prime Sports Golf. That is going to be at 4 o'clock Eastern time. We'll have player analysis, the latest odds and predictions. We'll also take an early look ahead at the Masters futures with players like Phil Mickelson, fresh off his win at the WGC Mexico. I believe he's like 18-1, right around that range, which is a great buy to win the Masters. Tiger Woods is roughly around 20-1. I would probably throw a few bucks on him too. So we'll talk about Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson, Masters futures. We'll preview the Valspar tomorrow. That's our next show here on the network at 4 o'clock Eastern. For Steve Merrill, Greg DePalma, we'll talk to you next time on Prime Sports College Hoops on the Prime Sports Radio Network.